Hi lovely people, I've been talking about our emotional resilience and recovering our mental health. This is the third part in this series. I initially talked a little bit about my own story, my own struggle, my own wrestle with my mental health, and talked about the 5 foundations that underpin all health and how we can use those to recover health. Then last week I talked a little bit about the 5 things that I think are foundational to recovering mental health. 4 of those being a bit more of a sort of mental attitude into how to make that journey towards feeling great again, and that final bit was really exploring sleep. And today I want to explore the issue of rest and my rest foundation. So I'm Dr. Sally. I am the founder of Dr. Sally Bell, and I've been a medical doctor for 21 years. And a few years ago, I got tired of treating symptoms and diseases and wanted to find an approach to health that focused not on disease, but on you. It focused not on suppressing symptoms, but getting to the root of why you were unwell and focusing on the whole of you instead of just a part of you. And now I use this approach to help people and guide people back to health. I have a small clinic where people come and see me. But my heart at the moment is working towards getting some of these things online and more accessible to people, because my heart and passion at the core of me is to put health back into your hands. So it's been a tough year. We are still just come out of national lockdown, and here in the UK, in England, and yes, I imagine it's had a significant impact on our emotional resilience and our mental health. And certainly in my work, on day to day, I am seeing a lot of people coming to me who have never suffered with their mental health. And seeking some help because they just feel like they've lost that resilience. And whereas before they would be able to really cope with certain situations, they find they're more irritable, they find they're more tearful, they find they just haven't got that capacity to keep changing and responding to situations. And before I go on, like I've said in my other talks, please, this advice that I'm giving really isn't for those that are in deep crisis. We can get very poorly with our thinking and not have insight to how unwell we are. And actually, me talking about some of the things you could do on a day-to-day basis can just seem so overwhelming and so much that it can send you into a spiral of, oh my goodness, I'm never going to get better. Actually, you're not thinking right, and you're poorly at the moment, and it's in those times that I would encourage you to get help. That might just be with a conversation initially with a friend or a family member, but ultimately it's about reaching out to us as medics so that we can keep you safe and help you through the crisis. So these videos are around helping those on that road to recovery. So, there's another pandemic in the world that nobody is talking about. The World Health Organization some years ago has said that stress is a global pandemic. And actually, stress perpetuates and is at the core of nearly every chronic disease that we see crippling our nation and stealing the lives of our parents, our friends, and our children. And so nobody wants to talk about stress because nobody admits that they're stressed, partly because stress has become normal. But when you look at the stress response, if you do a little bit of science just to begin with, bear with me, but the stress response initially was built to keep us from danger. It was from running away from the lion, and so in that moment when you're faced with danger, your body does a whole host of brilliant things in order to protect you and keep you safe. It turns things up and up-regulates certain things in our body, and it down-regulates and turns certain aspects and functions in our body off as well in order that you can respond well. And some of those things that happen in your body is your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up. You don't need your gut function anymore, so your gut function gets shut down. Your access to your long-term memory goes, because you need to stay hyper vigilant and you just want that initial short-term response. You are unable to sleep because if you've got faced with a lion, you don't want to be falling asleep. You want to be hyper alert and be able to get away. Your blood flow increases, to your muscles. Certain things, certain processes called inflammation and clotting are all upregulated and turned on in case you get bitten or injured. And so also when we think about sugars, and energy, your body is just flooded with sugars so that you have accessible energy to be able to make that sprint away from the lion. And then finally, especially in the face of when we're facing COVID, your ability to fight infection is down regulated. You don't need it any minute. It doesn't matter if you're going to die of an infection in 3 days or cancer in 5 years. You don't need that part of your body working. You just need to get away from the threat. And when you start thinking about the global diseases that are killing us every day, and you think about what stress does in our body, high blood pressure, dysregulation of our blood sugars, memory issues, clotting issues, overinflammation, which is a mechanism at the root of all chronic disease, gut issues I see all of the time, and as well as issues around cancer and our immunity and being prone to the virus like COVID-19. And it's like this perfect match with what goes on in our body when we're stressed. And the reason is that, historically it was lions that were the threat and we would run away, and our body in the process of running actually down regulates our stress response. Well, at the moment we don't have lions and we really ain't doing much running as a nation. And the things, when you look at the research, the things that actually, trigger that stress response in our body is everything from unopened emails on our computer, the beep of our phone, the noise of the traffic. It could be the movie that you're watching that has you on the edge of your seat. It can be the fact that your football team is losing. It can be the argument with the children, the more classic things that we think stress us. It could be public speaking. It could be a work deadline. But it really, in modern day life, we are just bombarded with stressors, and constantly, that stress response, all of those things that I have described to you is being kicked off, in our body. And the important thing to recognise is that, unless you're living out of sort of modern day life, it is highly, highly likely that the stress response is the predominant response in your body all day long. And I say to my clients when I see them, unless you can tell me the 5 things that you do every day, every week, every month to close the stress cycle, then you are very likely stressed, and all of those mechanisms are going on in your body and keeping you from getting well. And so the things we need to understand is that stress is a cycle. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, and we have the opportunity, while we might not be able to stop the stress cycle happening, although there is research around us having a different mental attitude to certain things, so therefore we don't get stressed by situations, and there's work around that bit. But often we can't, we don't expect certain things, and they do stress us. And while we can't always control, being exposed to those stresses, we can close the cycle. And that's the important thing. We can close the cycle, and we need practices in our daily lives that we are doing regularly. Even if we don't feel stressed, I can make comment on that later. It's really important that we learn to close the cycle. And one of the key things you need to understand, like this is so important that you get hold of this, that removing the thing that stressed you doesn't close the cycle. So if a deadline has stressed you, and that deadline, you get the work in and you move on, unless you do one of the practices we're going to talk about, that the stress and the impact of stress, your body has no idea that deadline has gone. And therefore all of those biochemical things that I was saying that was going on in your body continues. Or the argument with the husband, remove the husband, you still have the stress response. And so removing the stressor isn't the antidote and isn't the way to resolve your stress. The way to resolve your stress are some practices that pull you back into the rest and repair system within your body. You have two systems going on, your stress system and your rest and repair system. And they're both really important, and you don't ever want to just always be in one. They work hand in hand, but we need to learn to get into that rested state. Let me say a moment. I want to talk about people who say they don't feel stressed. I've worked for 21 years. You have to trust me on this. It's only observation. But my observation is people who think they're laid back and they don't feel stress, actually they don't feel pain, and they're often disconnected from their emotional life. And somewhere in their lifetime, they have learned to dissociate and are not connected with their internal feelings. And it's not that they can't feel, it's not that they're not stressed, it's that they can't feel the stress that's going on in their body and identify it for what it is. And for those people, just awakening to the whole host of our emotions internally and acknowledging them and feeling them for what they are is part of that process of wholehearted living. And it's part of that process of perceiving when we're stressed and learning how to turn that off. That might be a bit harsh, but anyway, that's my observation. So finally, we have the stress cycle. It's not enough to remove the stressor. So what can we do? There are lovely, lovely practices that I want to talk to you about. Simply breathing. It's not fluffy science. We know that when we do deep, slow belly breathing, where you use your diaphragm, that big muscle under your rib cage, and if you put your hand on your tummy and you take a deep breath and that hand is going up and down and your tummy is expanding, it's stimulating a huge big nerve in your body called your vagus nerve, and it is pulling you out of that stress response and into that rest and repair phase. So the simple use of breath on a regular basis and tying it into every time you stand in front of the kettle, just think about slowing your breathing. Or every time you open an email, just think about slowing your breathing. Or before you answer a text, just tie it into things that we do every day. That just helps you think about slowing and using your breath to get you into that rest and repair state within your body. But there are other things that really stimulate that big nerve that I've spoken about. Belly laughing is a wonderful thing for relieving stress. Having a good giggle and watching something that makes you laugh is really important. Gargling and singing, are other things that are just getting that big nerve working and helping you get into that restful state. Hugging, we know that if we hug for over 30 seconds, and if we touch, and whether that be a dog or a person, and just if we can hold something that gives us comfort, that too triggers that whole side of us that pulls us into that rest and repair state. Any form of exercise, let me be careful how I say that. So, you're walking and your yoga and most forms of exercise help us get into that rested state. However, if we are highly stressed, and if you go really hard at the gym and for a hard run, that is actually another stressor on our body. And we maybe need to talk another time about how you use exercise and how you train well and how to train if you are stressed. But on the whole, if you're highly stressed and really struggling with your emotional and mental life, I would go for walks, I would do yoga, I would swim, I would do that kind of more gentle, mindful movement as a way to reduce stress, because exercise done too hard can actually push you even further into that stressful state. Nature is known to help us down-regulate our stress cycle and help us get into that restful zone. So anything like your gardening or getting out into the woods or going for a walk. And then finally, let me end on meditation. So meditation is where we get out of that kind of rational thinking, we get to that deep centered state. And meditation doesn't mean just sitting there quietly. It can do, and if you've practiced the art of medication, I don't want to do meditation, you you can sit for 20 minutes and completely settle yourself and sit in silence. But often to get to that place, there are things that we can do meditatively that really get us out of that kind of rational, busy hamster wheel thinking and gets us centered. And that's very unique to the individual. It could be knitting, it could be, I love jigsaws, so I do a jigsaw and I just completely settle. It could be gardening, it could be washing your car, it could be tidying your room, it could be colouring. There are things that we can be doing with our bodies, but that help settle and quieten our mind. And the research shows that when we do these meditative activities and when we learn to meditate, that lots of stuff goes on in our brain to the point where actually it shrinks our stress centre and it builds our emotional resilience. And there's some wonderful apps. I've used Headspace historically. Actually, when I started out, it taught me how to meditate, taught me how to control my thoughts and observe my emotions, and it's just great, really practical. You start with 2 or 3 minutes and then you kind of build up. So yes, that's my little spiel today about aggressively eliminating hurry and stress in our life in a pursuit to reverse a whole host of diseases. I mean, we're focusing on mental health, but loads of other stuff gets better too when we really focus on having some of these practices on a sort of daily, weekly and monthly basis. The next time I'm going to talk about mood food and talk about whether food has a role in enhancing our happiness and our mental health. Obviously, the answer is yes. But yeah, any questions about this, then do pop them in the comments. My heart and passion is to put health back into your hands. So share this if you found it useful. If I've confused you, please tell me so that I can make sure I can work on how I communicate with you. But it's been great sharing with you today, and have a great day. Bye.